Mr. Conyers. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H-Res 819 for purposes of markup, and the clerk will report the resolution.
H-Res 819, directing the Attorney General of the United States to transmit to the House of Representatives not later than 14 days after the date of the
Without objection, the resolution is considered as read, and I'll recognize myself for an opening statement and then the ranking member. The sole item on today's agenda is H-Res 819, which was introduced by Representative Kucinich on November 28th and referred to the Judiciary Committee. The resolution requires the Attorney General to turn over any documents and legal memoranda in his possession related to the practice of targeted killing of United States citizens and targets abroad. It is a response to the killing of leading al-Qaeda member and his son in Yemen. Under the rules of the House, unless this committee acts within 14 legislative days, the resolution would become privileged. So I urge the committee to report the resolution unfavorably. A resolution of inquiry is a rare procedure. It would only be appropriate in such a sensitive matter if more ordinary paths of oversight had been blocked. With respect to its targeted killing program, the administration has not yet demonstrated the sort of obstruction that would warrant this extraordinary measure. Administration officials involved in covert actions are already required to give the House and Senate Intelligence Committees requested material related to those actions. There is no evidence that the administration has failed in this responsibility to disclose details of the targeted killing program. Both intelligence committees have conducted extensive oversight on every aspect of the program. This includes its legality, effectiveness, precision, foreign policy implications, and the care that is taken to minimize non-combatant casualties. Oversight of the administration's drone program has also been conducted by members of this committee. Ranking Member Conyers, along with Representatives Nadler and Scott, have sent letters seeking more information about the drone program and have received responsive documents. These members of this committee sent their latest correspondence just last week, and I trust that they intend to continue their dialogue with the Justice Department and will report back their findings. In a speech at Northwestern Law School, Attorney General Holder described the circumstances in which he believes the targeting of senior leaders of al-Qaeda abroad is lawful, even if the terrorists in question happen to be American citizens. The Attorney General argued that such a strike is appropriate only if three conditions are met. These are, first, the United States government has determined, after a thorough and careful review, that the individual poses an imminent threat of violent attack against the United States. Second, capture is not feasible. And third, the operation would be conducted in a manner consistent with applicable law of war principles, end quote. Some may disagree with the Attorney General's conclusions, and continuing oversight of the program is necessary. But the administration has made at least some effort to disclose the program's existence, its legal rationale, and the standards and protections the administration applies to the program. Congress's traditional oversight efforts are not yet at the sort of impasse that would justify a rare procedure like a resolution of inquiry. So I feel we should report this measure unfavorably. At the same time, all of us who know Congressman Kucinich recognize that his views are sincerely held, and we appreciate the public service he has given to our country. That concludes my opening statement, and the gentleman from Michigan is recognized for his.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. And I commend you for your comments. And I want to begin by indicating that I think this is an incredibly important subject. And I'm not sure if it's going to be resolved this morning or not. I would like to work with you and other members of the committee to determine just what we might want to consider doing after today's action. I too have great respect for our outgoing member from Cleveland, Ohio, and I feel very strongly about this subject. Unmanned aerial vehicles raises a very serious concern for me because as a follower of Martin Luther King Jr., I believe that justice and peace requires that we try to live up to those goals to the maximum extent possible. I do not know what the Intelligence Committee has done with regard to this subject matter, and because most of their procedures are not public, but I would like to try to get an idea about it. This resolution directs the administration to transmit to the House of Representatives any documents and legal memoranda in the Attorney General's possession related to the practice of targeted killing of United States citizens and targets abroad. Now, the Obama administration was not the first to use unmanned aerial vehicles or drones in its hunt for suspected terrorists, but it has, over the past 4 years, apparently expanded the program dramatically. And I'm deeply concerned by reports that American citizens have been targeted in some of these operations. Signature strikes, where a drone target suspicious behavior rather than specific individuals, is a great concern of mine. I'm concerned that some of these individuals have been killed far from an active battlefield, and I'm concerned that the legal rationale for this program remains for the most part secret. Because of these concerns, the ranking member of the Constitution Subcommittee, Gerald Nadler of New York, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Crime, Bobby Scott of Virginia, and myself have together written Attorney Holder on 3 separate occasions and requesting the legal and factual justification for these programs. We've also urged the Attorney General to make at least some portion of this analysis available to the public. And we, I think, made limited progress. The Attorney General and other senior administration officials seem to have begun to publicly discuss their rationale for targeted strikes. The Department of Justice has also provided some legal support for justification of this activity. So what we are doing today is something that the author of this resolution has not consulted, to my knowledge, with anybody on this committee about, including myself. And I think that this is an inappropriate way to begin the examination of questions of this magnitude. And I wanted to share these opening views with my colleagues, and I thank the chairman for his time.
Thank you, Mr. Conyers. Are there other members who wish to be heard? The gentleman from California, Mr. Ice, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support the decision not to support this resolution, but I would like to speak on the principle that Mr. Kucinich is rightfully so articulating, one that I believe this committee has exclusive jurisdiction in and needs to bring up in the next Congress. The rights, the civil rights of a U.S. person is something that has long been special. And we can all understand that this example would be a poor example to bring up to make a decision. This was a person, most of us believe, essentially renounced his citizenship, left the country, and advocated violence, helped in an orchestrated way. But let us understand that unless there are a reiteration by this committee, by Congress, and by any administration, that a U.S. person does have special rights. As the ranking member said, Martin Luther King said things people didn't like in this country. He didn't say things that were illegal, and yet he was locked up at times for it. Had he left the country, would he have been a legal target for his advocacy, particularly if some said it led to violence? I believe that that special care has to be part of our system, that the targeting of a U.S. person in or out of the United States has to live up to the most stringent rules. I disagree with one point that was implied, and that is that the Attorney General has cooperated. This Attorney General has been held in contempt by the House of Representatives on a bipartisan basis because he has consistently been aloof and unwilling to participate or supply reasonably information reasonably believed to be in Congress's rightful jurisdiction. But that doesn't change the fact that the decision about U.S. persons, the laws related to U.S. persons, go beyond one example for which Mr. Kucinich wants underlying information, and it goes to the real question of, will this committee in the next Congress look at the civil rights broadly of American persons outside the United States and reiterate that, in fact, what you cannot be assassinated for in the U.S., you should not be assassinated outside the U.S. And what you can be tried for in the U.S. doesn't mean that you'll be convicted or executed. And I think that's an important principle, because people will say things that we don't like in the U.S., and we're used to that. They'll say things we don't like outside the U.S., even denouncing our country, and I believe they'll still have that right. If they promote violence and attacks against Americans in such a way as to be combatants on the battlefield, then there need to be remedies, and whether those remedies are with a man and a trigger in an aircraft or a drone, to me is not the real question. And I hope that this committee will go to its core of civil rights in the next Congress, not on this example, but on the examples that ultimately we've stood for as the Committee of Civil Rights, as noted earlier, since Chairman Brooks and well before. And I thank the Chairman for his indulgence in this case, and I support the Chairman's position. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. Are there other members? The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we consider an issue of vital importance to our nation, to the rule of law, and to our standing in the community of nations. It has been reported that since 2004, the Central Intelligence Agency has conducted 320 drone strikes in Pakistan, killing at least 2,560 people, including at least 139 civilians. Another 55 strikes have taken place in Yemen. These strikes have been aimed either at specific individuals, so-called personality strikes, or at sites that show evidence of terrorist activity, referred to as signature strikes. While there have been some steps taken by the administration to provide information to the public about the legal and procedural justification for personality strikes, with that information coming directly from high-ranking administration officials, including Attorney General Holder and President Obama's top anti-terrorism advisor, John Brennan, the administration has yet to confirm the use of signature strikes and has resisted our ongoing efforts to obtain information, even on a classified basis, regarding the legal or factual principles governing this broader use of lethal force. This has been frustrating, to say the least. Along with the distinguished ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Conyers, and the distinguished ranking member of the subcommittee on crime, Mr. Scott, I have pushed the administration to make more information publicly available and to provide this committee with information and briefings essential to enable us to fulfill our oversight obligations and to ensure meaningful review of executive branch actions. We have written to the Attorney General on several occasions, and we have been in discussions with the Justice Department and the administration for more than a year in an effort to obtain this information. We have received some of the legal background the administration has relied on, but the process has been painfully slow, and I believe the response that we have received to date has been inadequate. I therefore want to commend our colleague from Ohio for his efforts to obtain information to which Congress is entitled. While this resolution has its flaws, it has occasioned the first real discussion that the Judiciary Committee has had on the topic of drone strikes. The power to wage war and to order the killing of any person, much less an American citizen, is perhaps the most awesome power the President has. The framers of our Constitution rightly place stringent limits on the authority of any one individual to take the nation down that road. It is the Congress that must take responsibility for declaring and funding any and all wars, and for ensuring adequate oversight of how the President exercises the authority to wage war that he has been granted. The administration's case for its legal authority to execute the drone program relies largely on the authority granted by the Congress in the Authorization for the Use of Military Force, the AUMF, of September 18, 2001. This committee, as the guardian of the Constitution and the Congress, has an obligation to look very closely at any assertion of executive power, especially when it comes to the power to wage war. It is highly regrettable that the committee has not done so, failing entirely to hold even a single hearing to explore this critically important topic. And I hope that in the next Congress we will take a more active and bipartisan role in examining lethal targeting and the use of drones, the extent to which that use is lawful under the AUMF or under other legal authority, and whether Congress should act in some way on this subject. So I want to commend the gentleman from Ohio for his effort, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to bring greater clarity and legal accountability to this program in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Nadler. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for your chairmanship of this committee. Appreciate your work on every issue. I will support the chairman's position on this resolution because I think procedurally this isn't the way to go. But I would like to echo some of the comments already been made. My concern is not why drones are used or when they're used, but the legal authority for the use of drones, whether it's against American citizens or signature strikes. And I would hope in the future the committee gets this issue, the legal authority for the use of strikes by drones overseas. We get that answer, and we can deal with the rest of the problems or the issues regarding drones overseas once we have concrete legal authority, if any, for the use of drones in this particular situation that is mentioned in Mr. Kucinich's resolution. So I look forward to dealing with that specific issue of legal authority, and I'll yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Poe. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, seeks recognition.
Yes, please.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, obviously your rights when we're at war aren't going to be the same as your rights when we're not at war, and your rights overseas aren't going to be the same as your rights when you're in the country. But when you have a process that puts American citizens on a kill list, I think it's important to have clarity as to how you get on the list and how you ascertain the standards, apparently, that to get on the list you have to be a targeted person, as a senior member of Al-Qaeda operative or allied operative. The person presents an imminent threat to the United States. Person cannot be captured, and the country in which a person is located has either consented to the strikes or has indicated its unwillingness to take steps necessary to ending the threat to the United States. Those seem to be reasonable standards, but there's no process to make sure you've got the information right. There's no question. You can't question the accuracy. You can't cross-examine the witnesses. Once somebody has, by whatever standard, whatever process comes to those conclusions, there's no right of appeal, and you're a target. We need clarity, as the gentleman from Texas pointed out, on the legal authority to do this, but also clarity on the process and the whatever checks and balances there may be. This information is extremely important. The resolution asks for that information, but as others have indicated, we're in the process of going back and forth, getting the information. Actually, the information that we're requesting is actually broader than what's in the resolution. Resolution just talks about targeted. We're looking for both the targeted and the signature strikes where an individual isn't named. We're in the process of getting this information. I think the resolution at this point is premature, but we need to continue, as others have indicated, making sure we get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Are there other members who wish to be heard? If gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I start my remarks, Mr. Chairman, if I might, for the record, first of all, thank you for your service, and certainly we have had some enormous successes during tenure, both you and Mr. Conyers, and I thank you so very much for the service and look forward to working with you,
thank you.
Going forward. And I also want to add my remarks to the late Jack Brooks. I was able to attend his funeral in Beaumont this past weekend, and many know that he had remained a steadfast friend of this committee, chairperson of this committee, chairman of this committee, and everybody knows how tough Jack Brooks was, but he loved this country and he loved the Constitution, and I wanted to acknowledge him in his passing and to say to Charlotte and his family, we offer them our deepest sympathy. Possibly in the time that Jack Brooks was the chairperson here, he might have convened over a similar discussion had it been in his time. I want to raise the issue, and I want to acknowledge the work of Ranking Member Conyers, Nadler, and Scott, who over the years have sent letters on this very question. And I'm disappointed that it has been such a long period of time that we have yet not been able to get answers on the utilization of drones. And so as this resolution comes forward, its underlying premise has merit, which is to seek documents and legal memoranda to answer the question on the practice of targeting allegedly and killing United States citizens and the collateral damage of drones as well. I ask unanimous consent to put into the record an article from the Atlantic Council, Drone Strike on Democracy. Ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
And take just a brief comment from this article, which speaks to the idea of the percentage of non-combatants killed, but according to at least one major study, has bred a climate of fear and resentment among civilian populations in those societies that we really would want to be an ally short of the horrific persons who engage in terrorism. When you think of an American citizen abroad, you think of the Imam in Yemen and his 16-year-old son. And we don't want to be associated with the likes of that individual. But I believe this committee has a responsibility, and I'm glad that we have opened this debate to project into the future a hearing about the utilization of drones. When you're in your district, you hear local police departments being excited about the utilization of drones. My concern is, what is the level of the invasion of privacy of American citizens both here and abroad? How is this tool, albeit a scientific genius, often showed off or often shown in some of our best spy movies, how can we ensure that we are protecting the constitutional rights of privacy, the Fourth Amendment, the protection against unreasonable search and seizures, if it can be interpreted as such? And I believe those questions should be answered. This is sort of the expanded realm and parameters of what this resolution is attempting to do. So members, as we move forward, I would hope that we would consider this as a very serious issue as we are considering the new advances in technology as relates to the privacy of the American citizen. We're going to have to address it. We look forward and ask that the administration address it. We know that drones can provide a safety net for the men and women of the United States military in harm's way. I'm glad for that. I celebrate that. But at the same time, where there is goodness, we have to address the question of how much damage it also brings about. That is a fair question for this committee, a fair question for a number of committees of jurisdiction, but I hold to the fact that this committee, which is the holder and protector of the Constitution, must answer this question, and the members of this Congress must, in debate and discourse, answer this question as well in the global discourse and debate on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate. So I add my support for the concept of what has to be done going forward, and it is most helpful that this resolution has opened up a vital and important debate, Mr. Chairman, as I yield, that coddles the Constitution, and that is the job of the House Judiciary Committee on behalf of the American people. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson-Lee. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Chu, is recognized.
Well, I have many unanswered questions about how the U.S. is using drones abroad. I believe that members of Congress, and especially the Judiciary Committee, have a critical oversight responsibility to balance the national security of our nation with respect for the rule of law. For example, it's been reported that after one signature strike, another follows immediately, resulting in civilian rescuers being injured and killed. These drone attacks are leaving people afraid to go to group gatherings like weddings. Since 2004, the CIA has conducted 320 drone strikes in Pakistan alone. It's resulted in the deaths of 2,560 people, but what is very worrisome is the 139 civilians. There needs to be greater oversight in the use of drones. This resolution raises this issue, and I hope that this committee will look into this and other issues pertaining to it in the next Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. I'm going to recognize myself for purposes of offering a motion, and I now move that the resolution be reported adversely to the House. The question is on the motion. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the resolution is reported adversely, and the ayes have it. There being no further business, we stand adjourned. Let me say to members that there's a good possibility we'll have a markup of one bill next week, and that will conclude our business for the year. It's likely to be a bill by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe.